The video game industry is one that hasn't been explored to its full potential. Everyone is just going for cinematic over gameplay these days. It's not supposed to look like a movie, guys. I'm more of a gameplay over story kind of person, which is why the first Destiny has clocked in about 500 hours on my Xbox. But video games as a whole are generally quite good. There are a few outliers, sure, but there were so many good ones that it made this list pretty tough to do. Ever since I got on YouTube all of 6 months ago, my order has changed quite a lot. But hey, it was still a challenge to order these. Don't stay up past bedtime, kids. It hinders your decision making. The first-person shooter genre has been flooded with reboots each year, subpar knockoffs, and glitchy messes of games. Every once in a while you get something good, like the first Modern Warfare game. But you're just lacking customization in that department. You really need to find the hidden gems within each game. But what if you're broke? What if you spent all your money on a new PC and now have nothing to play? Still craving that FPS dose? That's fine, because Team Fortress 2 has been free for quite a while. Team Fortress 2 is one of those instances of a game where you can unlock everything without paying a dime, if you have the patience and rely on other people to buy. But enough about the free-to-play done fairly well. How's the actual gameplay? Fairly decent. Each of the 9 classes are incredibly balanced with several different playstyles to each one. In what universe did someone think to themselves, yeah guys, Demo Man is great, he's got a grenade launcher and a sticky bomb, but what if we turned him into a medieval knight? Almost every unlock in the game is never a direct upgrade from what you currently have. Sure, it'll have more damage, but what are the downsides to it? This way, you aren't allowing competitive play to be dominated by one overpowered setup, or get vote kicked if you don't have a specific gun. Not that competitive play is even viable these days. Meet Your Match is really screwed up matchmaking. I don't know if you've heard. I love video games that allow me to fulfill certain criteria of my life. Have I played a game that allows me to use telekinetic powers all throughout the game and live out my childhood dreams? Not yet. A game that lets me catch Pokemon and fulfill that childhood dream? Yeah, it's called Pokemon. But what about weapons? Obviously, most weapons aren't very practical in today's day and age because you can always shoot at whatever's giving you problems with big guns. Unless the weapons are on your body, in which case we get a game like Prototype. Transforming your limbs into weapons doesn't sound that great of an idea on paper. I imagine it's a bit clunky and top-heavy, but it somehow works in Prototype. You get a choice between several unique weapons that have different abilities, like your claws, which can create massive spikes in the ground, for some reason, I don't fucking know. Then you can turn your arms into swords and some sort of whip thing. Then you can give yourself armor, and you wonder why it took game developers this long to actually make it a reality. I'd like to have glided around in stolen helicopters earlier, guys. Really would've. And yet, there's some actual substance behind this game. Between fighting the zombie outbreak and those generic asshole military guys, you're given plenty of things to test out all your new toys on. Oh yeah, and you also eat people by beating them to death and absorbing their memories. Sure, that's a great source of protein. I have a certain love for choose-your-own-adventure games, even if they can be a bit linear with how the story progresses. I know I said earlier that I like gameplay over story, but goddamn, some of these games have such good story that I find myself not giving a shit. Helps if the gameplay is good too. Telltale is alright, although more focused on story and not the point-and-click style of things. If you want a good story and gameplay, that's why the company BioWare exists. The Dragon Age series is great, but Mass Effect is where it really shines. The first one was a bit too slow with its pacing, and the third one had a terrible ending, but leave it to the second game to get everything right. The second Mass Effect combines the best parts of the first and third game with none of the setbacks. The story is entertaining, the characters are some of my favorite in any series ever, and each choice you make has a real impact on the final ending. I won't spoil it for those who haven't played it, but if you aren't prepared and make right decisions in the heat of the moment, some, most, or all of your crew will die. These kind of decisions that actually have meaning makes the game carry a lot more weight than initially thought. You grow attached to these characters, you do the missions for them, and actually care about each of their backstories. Name one other game that's done that for you. How's the actual gameplay? It's pretty good. Guns are fun to customize, the abilities are creative and a blast to use. That little extra mile helps more than you know, I'll say that much. The era of PS2 and original Xbox gaming has long since passed. The likes of popping in an old copy of Final Fantasy VII has all been but forgotten. The old Xbox had some great games on it, specifically Fable 1, which was the high point of the series. PS2 as well, with the likes of Ratchet & Clank, Jak and Daxter, and a little gem of a game you've never heard of called Dark Cloud. It may just be me referencing back to a bygone era, but Dark Cloud shows exactly what a roguelike game should be. Basically, the entire world is destroyed, and you're told by the Great Fairy King to put it back together using your Amelia Stone, which allows you to remove people, buildings, items, and trees from stasis in Atlas Stones. Then comes the second part of the game. Normally it'd just be, go through the dungeons, get these weapons, here's the boss, and that's the game, everybody. But no. When you remove things from the Atlas Stones, you can put the town back together how you'd like using the Georama feature. Of course, if you put it together the way the game wants you get a reward, but it's optional nonetheless. The dungeon crawling aspect is great too. As stated before, every time you enter a new floor, it randomizes itself. New chests to find, new rewards to get, and a new back floor to explore, which is just a harder version of the normal floor, but with better rewards. The weapon upgrading is spot on, allowing you to take weapons you don't want, break them down, and put them into new weapons, carrying over any new status they may have acquired. The average playtime for this game is supposed to be 42 hours, but I could tell you for a fact that's a dirty lie. At the very least, you'll be playing for 50 hours, and that's time well spent. Nintendo hasn't always been the most liked company out there. Come to think of it, I don't think they ever have been. With the recent success of the Switch, Breath of the Wild, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe seems to have renewed people's faith in the company. Not sure why it needed to be renewed in the first place, but hey, the Wii U still exists. But Nintendo has been making some good decisions lately. I mean, they released Pokemon Sun and Moon, and that game is amazing. Maybe it's due to the fact that they got virtually everything right. Before Sun and Moon came out, my favorite Pokemon game was Fire Red, but now I have some things to rethink. So what did Sun and Moon add to the series? New Pokemon? They do that all the time. New story? They do that too. But the way they go about doing it makes it feel like you're playing an entirely new game. The characters are interesting for once. The new Pokemon are cool, with interesting designs. The story makes sense. The new Z-moves make combat more of a chess match than actual Pokemon. And the fact that it's on the 3DS and you could take it anywhere you go hasn't lost sight with me. Even though it's nothing new to the Pokemon series, as it's almost always been on a handheld, but the fact that you can take Pokemon wherever you want allows lots of playtime. I've got about 400 hours on the game myself, and still have more stuff to do. I'll get around to it eventually. Am I allowed to quote other YouTubers on this site? I am. Okay. One of my favorite quotes from Rabbidluigi is this.
Indie games don't have the same restrictions as other massive titles. Fewer fans and shareholders to upset if it's not quite what they're expecting.
The restrictions given to massive developers adds more pressure if a game doesn't turn out correct. You could turn to No Man's Sky and think, yeah, that's a good concept, but terribly executed. With a budget of about $1 million, it's impressive with what they were able to do, but just, no. Thankfully, less people notice if an indie game fucks up. This allows this sort of back portal to games that have long since been forgotten. Games like Earthbound getting a spiritual successor in Undertale, and Harvest Moon getting a much better version in Stardew Valley. While it may not be the game for everyone, Stardew Valley manages to take the essence of Harvest Moon and make it better. It's a very relaxing game, and it's hosted some of the most innovative things I've seen in a long time. To an outsider looking in, it looks like just another farming game, and to an extent you'd be right. But not only does it allow you to befriend all the villagers in the game, you can also go mining for resources, go to different festivals, and witness all this happening during the course of a year. The crops are varied, and everything you do feels real, from talking to the NPCs, harvesting crops, or just restoring the library to its former glory. You'll get invested. I'll stand by that one thing that one person said that I can't remember. You will have a minimum of 50 hours on this game. Unless you're me. So let's talk about No Man's Sky again. I mean, it's supposedly better now, but it's nowhere near a functioning adventure game. Going to the same planets over and over with little variety doesn't really do much. Why not have giant caves with a whole heaping of new enemies to fight, new weapons to get, and an actual story to get invested in? It'd also help if it gave you a shit ton of things to do alongside the main game. So if you're looking for an adventure game that could satisfy everything you've ever wanted, then the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim is here to keep you busy for hundreds of hours. I don't think I need to explain why this is on here. Skyrim is one of those games where everyone can agree it's good. With the amount of things you can do, you'll be playing for quite a long time and hardly get anything done. Not to say that it's slow, quite the opposite. Combat is fluid, the story is interesting, leveling is fantastic, quests are full and fleshed out to the highest degree. Every cave, every NPC, every weapon has a story, and there's so much to do in this game. Skyrim is one of those games that appeals to what every gamer wants. RPG, first person, story driven, gameplay driven, it's got everything. Unless your favorite game is Hoonie Pop. There are mods. As I said before, the first-person shooter genre is crowded with games that don't really invent themselves. We've already talked about TF2 and how it does something to change up the formula. It has a class-based system that provides a unique feel to the game. But what if you wanted to combine the FPS genre with something a little more interesting? Let's take the player interaction from World of Warcraft, add in the loot gathering from games like Borderlands, and give it a feel like Call of Duty. Oh. With what seems like the most controversial spot on this list, Destiny has come under a lot of fire for quite a bit of reasons. The story being a mess, the grind being tedious, and just all around failing in most aspects. But I digress. Whatever Destiny gets wrong, it gets two things right. Of course, this is after the Taken King expansion. Vanilla Destiny had major problems. The weapon designs are fun to look at. I mean, look at all the variety with the exotic weapons. Not to mention that, since it was introduced, the player versus player crucible has been improved to the point where even a level 1 player can join in and have almost no disadvantages against the pros. It levels the playing field, and I've spent many hours in the raids. King's Fall is pretty much the best thing ever. This is one game that you really should try out, and not judge for its shortcomings. Let's just hope the second game gets everything right the first time. While TF2 is still a good game, it has become a bit outdated. Valve certainly hasn't done much with it, and Half-Life 3 is most likely going to release before the Pyro update. Valve can rely on Steam to generate infinite profits, so why would they work on TF2 anymore? I mean, the team is only about 5 people now. At this current state, TF2 isn't really going anywhere, but that's okay because Overwatch exists now and is about 12 times better. Whether or not you think it's just a TF2 clone, Overwatch has made quite a name for itself, with its incredibly refined formula, making it so that there really is no bad hero. Each hero counters another, and there are millions of different team combos you can have. Each hero is extremely creative with design, abilities, and personality. With 25 million players daily, the game will be kept alive for as long as Blizzard wants it to. No microtransactions to be seen, excluding loot boxes, but you can even earn those normally. The one complaint I can make about the game doesn't revolve around the game itself, but rather the slightly toxic community it's acquired. That's okay, because we have the mute button for a reason. Just focus on getting those golden guns, guys. I've always been a fan of games that change up with each playthrough. The idea that no two playthroughs of one game will be the same makes things a lot more interesting as opposed to just one linear story each time. Games like Dark Cloud that offer up a new experience each time you enter a dungeon, getting new weapons and finding new monsters. It adds a lasting freshness and replayability. Imagine if every game was random each time you played through it. Completely random Mario, Zelda, and the like. But hey, we already have a Zelda game that changes each time you play it. It's called The Binding of Isaac. I honestly didn't expect Binding of Isaac Rebirth to be this high up on my list, but the more I played, the more I grew attached to the items, the bosses, and the community with the amazing mods that have come out recently. In case you don't know, The Binding of Isaac is a roguelike dungeon crawler full of items that synergize with each other fantastically. You can have a giant laser beam with brimstone, get telekinetic shots, and this happens. Or get the Ludovico technique with the Parasite and Strange Attractor, and yeah. I'm exactly what you'd expect, and The Binding of Isaac wasn't always my favorite game. If I made this list a year ago, it wouldn't even be here. Countless hours watching my brother play it on the family computer, and finally being excited for the Afterbirth Plus DLC, added up to me actually wanting to play it. Didn't regret a thing.